Take a pit stop for all things NASCAR with the Four Tire Change podcast. Here is your host, Dawson Iserlo.
Welcome back in, ESPN Southwest Louisiana. It's the Four Tire Change podcast. Dawson Iserlo, your host, breaking down everything related to the NASCAR Cup Series. This week was Nashville Superspeedway, a track that's important to me. I've been there a couple of times, and I really enjoyed my experience. I was at the Cup race 2 years ago there when Chase Elliott won, so that certainly played into my pick going with Chase Elliott this weekend. And he had a couple chances, but in the end, it was not a factor. What a wild race this was, and it's one of those situations where it's a tale of two races, really. The beginning stages, and then the rain delay, and then everything that was the chaos afterwards. You know, we went into this, look, it's a unique track. It's concrete. It's the largest concrete track we go to, certainly bigger than Bristol and Darlington, and, you know, that brings a little bit of unpredictability into it. We've had some really good races there, though, since they returned to that track. I think it's a great market for NASCAR to be in. I know the Nashville Fairground Speedway was kind of the hot topic a few years ago about bringing it back, but for now, Nashville Superspeedway is there, and I think it puts on a great race and a great show, and I certainly think that it's a fun trip and a fun track for fans to be able to go out to. So I don't know exactly why they want this race at 2:30 in the afternoon. I guess I do know. It's the TV thing, but certainly I feel like this could be a night race with how hot it is in Nashville in late June, early July. Regardless, all that being said, the beginning stages of this race, pretty tame, right? You had some cars. Christopher Bell certainly looked like he was going to be the fastest car of the day. Larson was in the mix. Reddick was in the mix. Hammond was in the mix. But, you know, for real, it looked like it was going to be Bell's race, and he kind of cruised a little bit. You know, in the stages, the first stage ends, you get through part of that second stage. You're not quite halfway, which was important because of the rain coming, although I think they'd have been able to get this one in anyway. I think they'd have stuck it out. I don't think they'd have called it early. The lightning comes, you got to get everybody off the track, and, you know, first of all, it washes the track clean. I think that's interesting, some of the rubber buildup. So I don't know how much that played into the racing in the second half of the race, but I think it definitely was at least a factor worth noting. And then from there, you know, it gets really way more wild. Like the first segment of this race didn't have a whole lot of action. There were some good battles at different points in the field. But after the rain delay, we got some really good stuff. And as you work down the stretch there, a couple different strategies come into play. Tires, no tires, you know, and that extra gas ended up being very important as we found out. But Ross Chastain ends up cycling to the lead, and he's got a chance to win this thing. Hamlin runs him down. And, you know, Denny Hamlin, I thought, just put on a masterclass. Excellent job making the move, kind of getting Chastain loose a little bit, going around clean. And we know those two have gotten into it in the past. It was a clean battle for the lead, and Hamlin got the best of him. Hamlin was faster, but, you know, that looked like it was going to be the race-winning move. I think he makes that pass with 6 or 7 laps to go. But then in the end, of course, we get the caution on the very last lap, the spin there. I think it was Cindric, and that sets up the overtimes. And all those cars at the front, they were, you know, dicey on gas just to finish in regulation. So now you start getting overtime restarts, and everybody stays out, and you're going, man, I don't know how this is going to go. You get the first caution. Hamlin looks like he's got the race won again, by the way. And there's a spin right at the very end there before he takes the white flag. You get another reset. You get another caution. Eventually, after a couple of these things, a lot of the leaders go, look, we just got to come down and get fuel. Larson runs out of gas on one of the restarts. So they end up, you know, basically everybody cycling out except Joey Logano. Logano stays out. Logano makes it on fuel somehow. He blocks a surging Tyler Reddick. Zane Smith was also right in the mix. Smith actually finishes second. And that's your race. Joey Logano steals one and gets his first win of the season, gets himself into the playoffs. So many big implications. Look, Logano was on the wrong side of the cut line for most of the season, and we talked about, you know, how that 22 team just hasn't been clicking. I don't know if you could even say this is an example of them clicking because they weren't the fastest car. I don't even know if they were top 10, top 15 fastest car. They won this race because of somehow not running out of fuel when everybody else did at the front. And so, you know, it's big for him, though, because it kind of takes the pressure off, and they can kind of search for some speed in different areas, whereas before, they're always worried about getting finishes and getting points, right? So you don't want to take too much of a risk. Now with that win in your back pocket, entire Penske team has a win. All 3 cars, Austin Cindric, Ryan Blaney, Joey Logano will all be in the playoffs. So that team can kind of search for some things, which is important to help them in their playoff pursuit. But all that being said, you know, Tyler Reddick's comments after the race, he was so upset with himself, it seemed like, or he was upset with Logano but didn't want to say it, but I think it was more he was upset with himself. We've seen that before from Reddick, but not like this. And, you know, going back, watching that replay, I watched it again this morning. I've seen it a handful of times now. I guess there's a couple other moves that Reddick could have made at some point during that green-white checker, but I don't know. I don't know exactly what he's so upset about. I wonder if he's going to elaborate on that at some point, maybe next weekend, when they're talking before the next race. But all in all, that was a little bit strange to see him so down in the dumps afterwards. Kyle Busch's bad luck continues. But the big thing here, not only does Logano win, but the cut line now moves, and let's talk about that for a minute here. Logano now moves that up a whole slot, and you now got a 51-point gap between Alex Bowman, who is the last car in the playoffs right now, and then Bubba Wallace is out there. You got Chase Briscoe. Kyle Busch is way back more than 100 points. Like, this is getting really interesting, and again, I think the scenario that's brought up that's even more intriguing. It's unlikely that Bubba would be able to run down, or so one of those cars right outside the cut would be able to run down Bowman at 50-plus points, as long as Bowman, is able to start every race, doesn't have any health issues, anything like that. But if one more new car wins, which we know is so possible, that's outside of that group. I mean, again, Bubba could win a race. You could have one of those guys that I just talked about, Kyle Busch, could definitely jump up and do it. Then that cut line between Bowman and, let's talk about Ty Gibbs and Martin Truex Jr., although Truex feels a little bit safer than the rest of them, it gets really, really close for those cars. And Ross Chastain's in that category. So that could become really interesting if you get one more new winner. And we're going to the Chicago Street Course this week, which means, you got a great shot at a new winner coming outside of the point standings. Now, if it's Shane Van Gisbergen like it was last year, that won't mess with the bubble because, of course, he's not going to be Cup Series playoff eligible. He's running for the playoffs in the Xfinity Series. Last couple things I want to clear up about Nashville before we move on to Chicago. NASCAR made a couple decisions. Kyle Busch got his position back after that first wreck in overtime, and I think that was pretty confusing to a lot of people, myself included. Seemed like he was, while he wasn't in the wreck, he was certainly involved in the incident. He was stuck behind a car. He didn't maintain the pace. They said it was a safety thing, and that he kept he avoided making contact with the side of the vehicle in front of him. I guess I get it. I'm not sure that's how those have been officiated before. So that was a little strange. It ends up kind of working itself out because Kyle Busch gets involved when Larson stacks up on the next restart and doesn't have a chance, and he ends up wrecking out of this race anyway. But man, just a snake-bitten season for Kyle Busch and company, and not sure where to go from here if you're the A team. They've got to try and find a way to win a race. It does not look at all like they're going to be able to get back in this thing on points, as we talked about with where Bowman is and the situation now that Logano took up another spot. They got to try and find a win, which you don't put that past Kyle Busch and company, but the RCR team in general hasn't had a ton of speed. I know Busch has had way more speed than Austin Dillon has, and he's been up in the mix, and obviously, as I talked about, it's a lot of bad breaks. If he doesn't have all these bad breaks, he probably is right in the mix on points right now, but A-team's got to try and figure it out, But with all that being said, I thought the racing was good. I thought NASCAR, for the most part, made the right calls outside of a couple of them there. And, we'll see. We'll see what happens next week, and that's where I want to go now. The Chicago Street Course, just so much intrigue here, right? We go there last year, and it's a rain, kind of messed up weekend. But SVG, this comes over from the Supercars, stuns everybody, winning his first ever race. Just really was surprising. Ends up landing him an Xfinity ride, and potentially, look, he's going to have a really good chance to make it to the Cup Series at some point with Trackhouse or somebody else. So, all that was exciting last year, but he kind of dominated that thing. I think now you go back with everybody having a year worth of notes at that course. And I know there's, I think, some slight modifications to it, but for the most part, going to be the same course there. I think you're going to have a different, much more competitive race. And I think SVG will be a factor, but I don't think he's going to cruise. I don't think he's going to control this thing. Despite me seeing some people that kind of think that's how it's going to go. I really don't see that happening. I think this is going to be one of those more open road course type situations. And, you think to any of the guys that are always a factor at these types of tracks. I know Tyler Reddick's going to be in the mix. Michael McDowell's going to be in the mix. And I'm actually going to go with my race pick with the guy that I just talked about a little earlier. Tyler Reddick's down in the dumps right now. We saw it in the post-race interview, and I think he could use one right here. And that 45 team, they've had speed. A little bit of mixed results for him at the road courses so far this year, but we know how good he is when he's got a fast car at those types of tracks. It's different than it's the street course, but I think Reddick's going to have a good day. I'll go with Tyler Reddick to win the race. Look, I think the Chicago Street Course, it's a lot of fun. It's one of the bolder things NASCAR's ever done. You're talking about going to a major metropolitan city and shutting it down for a few days, and they pulled it off last year, even with all the rain. Hopefully they get some better weather and things go well, but it should be exciting. Really cool views, really cool spectacle that they put on there. There'll be an Xfinity race on Saturday as well. Looking forward to that. And then the Cup cars will get after it on Sunday. I think it's going to be fun, and I'm excited for it. So keep following with us, liking, comment, subscribing. Four Tire Change. We roll along. NASCAR playoffs getting closer than ever, and we'll continue to cover it all for you.